You captured everybody's feelings this morning. I mean, really disappointing. I mean, just about as bad as you could play. And I don't know what Julius Randle was doing this series, and last night encapsulated all of it. You know, he was 8 for 21 shooting, and he had 8 turnovers on top of it. And he struggled. He lost his confidence. Whatever you want to say, he was doing things on the court that I hadn't seen him do all year long. And this was the entire series. It wasn't just last night, although last night I think was the culmination of it. And it was bad. I mean, it was bad basketball. And I feel bad for him because, you know, he was one of the reasons why the Knicks got to where they got to this year. He came back. He was trying to make a point, trying to show everybody that, you know, he could be a top-end basketball player. And really, for 72 games he was. I mean, he had a couple bad games here or there during the season, but he played his worst basketball, if you remember, kind of down the stretch and then, of course, in the playoffs. And he was like last night, I even sent a text to you. I'm like, what is he doing?
Yeah, all the turnovers.
I couldn't believe the turnovers, and he just kept shooting, and it seemed to me like the whole thing morphed into iso ball, and it just got to a point where you couldn't watch it anymore. And DeAndre Hunter, by the way, the kid from Virginia who had the knee injury most of the season, you know, you could see that he's a player too, you know, and he outplayed R.J. Barrett last night. And it's just, you know, and R.J. Barrett, hey, we're going to win this game and we're going to go down to Atlanta. This is why you don't say things like that, because the next day you wake up and you look like, you know, you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, unless you're Clint Capella. When you say we're going to go in there and send you on vacation, he does exactly that.
Well,
he scores 4 of their first 6 points, dunking. At that point, I even felt terrible about the game because I was like, this guy, right in the beginning, Nate McMillan is like, we're going to get him involved because he talked a bunch of trash and we're going to get him going. And they did exactly that. So, I mean, yeah, R.J. Barrett could say something and didn't back it up, and Clint Capella said things far worse.
Well, Clint's been around.
Did back it up.
Clint's been around a little bit longer than R.J. Barrett has. But, you know, hey, look, it doesn't take away from what the Knicks accomplished, and I know there's a lot of good to talk about.
Yeah.
But now you got to pick up the pieces, and you got to analyze the decisions that the Knicks are going to make. They got $60 million under the salary cap. They got 2 first-round picks. They're in a good situation to improve the team. Hey, look, Derrick Rose ran out of gas. You know, this is what happens. And, you know, I don't want to, you know, kill Thibodeau because I am proud of what Thibodeau has done here. He's brought back the Knick culture. He's brought back defense. He's brought back toughness. You know, he just needs better players. He needs a lot of better players, you know, and they pretty much, you know, stood still at the trading deadline, didn't really add anything. And at the time, if you remember,
we were all okay with it.
We were all okay with it. Everybody was okay with it. And the reason we were okay with it is because we felt like this team gave all they could to Tom Thibodeau and to the organization to get them back to relevancy. And I still look back at that time, and I remember saying, let this team do it. Let's see how far this team can go. So I'm not going to sit here this morning and roast them because they only got this far. I mean, and they played a horrendous basketball over these last 5 games, because I believe that they should have been given the opportunity to go all the way. Now, I will say that when Thibodeau changed the rotation around and started moving guys around and everything, I felt like he panicked. I felt like he had to have Derrick Rose out there as a starter, and Derrick Rose, obviously, last night, after 5 games in that role, basically didn't even play in the fourth quarter. So that just goes to tell you that he was worn out. And, you know, when you're 32 years old and you're going against this 22-year-old, like, you know, speedster all over the basketball court, it's impossible, you know, for a 32-year-old guy to be able to stay with him. So I'm really disappointed with the way the game ended last night. I thought it would be a little bit more fight from the Knicks, but I'm more shocked at the way that Julius Randle played these 5 games.
Well, sure. I mean, it was almost like we were totally shocked by, you know, the way that his season went in the regular season and how he was an MVP candidate and most improved player, and then we were equally as shocked as how that man disappeared in the playoffs. And you mentioned, you know, how it doesn't take away from what they did in the regular season. And no, it doesn't wipe it away. I mean, we were watching Knicks playoff basketball in May and June, and it was great, and they got a win. But it almost could not have gone worse than it did in the playoffs, and it does take a little bit away from it. And maybe that's just because it's the reactionary next day. But this was really bad. And not just the play in the last 3 games, but, you know, the fans spitting on Trae Young, the fan throwing a beer at Emmanuel quickly, you know, Spike Lee leaving early. The Knicks became a joke again in this series. They did. And everybody that wanted to see them fail got exactly what they wanted. An embarrassing performance, blown out by not one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. I'm sorry. This was not like getting blown out by the Nets, the Sixers, or the Bucks. They got blown out by the Atlanta Hawks, who, by the way, finished below the Knicks in the standings, and they got crushed by that team. They got trash-talked and then beaten their building. It does take something away from it. And then all the thoughts that I had about building this team and going forward have now changed. I thought that Julius Randle could be a second guy to a great superstar. After watching this garbage, maybe he could be the third best player on a championship level team. Because this was horrible. This wasn't like just regular bad. This was horrible.
Yeah.
I want to say how fun it was, and we'll get to that point. And yes, I'm not like there were moments that I had with the Knicks this year that you had with all the fan base had that I didn't think I was going to have this year, that I didn't think maybe I'd have ever again.
Remember, Vegas had them at 21.5 wins?
And they blew right through that, and all the respect to them. But the way that they played in this series and the way it went down and the way that the Knicks announced themselves back in the playoffs in this way, not only the team, but also the fan base, they embarrassed themselves. They did. And anybody, all the Knicks fans that wanted to see them go down in embarrassing fashion, they got what they wanted. All the people that said Knicks fans don't know how to act because they haven't been here before, they got what they wanted. The Hawks, just like... We compared this team to the 90s Knicks. Clint Capella said we're going to go into your building, beat you, and send you on vacation. And then he did.
Yeah,
he did.
He did.
That's the antithesis, my friend, of the 90s Knicks.
No, I know it is. And, let's face it, the Knicks have had a long-term problem that they have been unable to fix for years. They've tried with veterans. They've tried with draft picks. And you know what that is. They never have a top-flight point guard, ever. And even though Trae Young wasn't shooting great at the beginning of this game, so I was going back and forth to Mike and Clyde and then to Reggie Miller and to Marv, because I wanted to hear both sides.
Sure.
And Clyde and Mike are the home guys, and they do their thing. And then when you listen to Reggie Miller talking about Julius Randle not shooting and waiting to shoot. And this is one of the greatest shooters that the NBA has ever seen. So he knows better than anybody what he's watching, what he's witnessing, and what the problems are. Even he was frustrated with Julius Randle. And even he was saying, you see that? He has the ball, you got to catch and shoot, but he's not catching and shooting. He's pumping, he's putting the ball on the ground, and then he's shooting over somebody. And he was so spot on about the frustration of watching Julius Randle last night. And that's what, when you listen to great players like that, even though he did say one thing, there was, New York is used to having Reggie's fill up the basket. That was a little over the top. I thought.
Of course he was going to do that.
But that was a national broadcast, so I'll let him slide on that one. But it was, I don't know, it's just, so this team is an older team when you think about it. So Thibodeau leaned on all of his older guys when it really came to crunch time. And we saw at the end of game 2, the 5 guys that were on the court, all the old guys were on the court. And then you look forward to the way that he started these games. He inserted Taj Gibson as a starter. I don't know if it was because of Nerlens Noel. He took out Elfrid Payton, which all Knicks fans wanted anyway. And then it ended up costing him at the end. And again, it goes back to being point guard less. They just don't have anybody. When other teams come in here with great point guards, they have nobody that can cover them.
No, I know.
I'll just go back to the beginning of this series. Now, we both were confident going in, and I felt like they were going to have to do something to mitigate Trae Young. Somehow, some way, somebody was going to have to shut him down, and they were going to have to do it collectively. The problem is that, they really don't have a guy. And hey, look, Reggie Bullock tried his ass off. Emmanuel quickly tried his ass off. Frank Ntilikina came in for one play, and he gave him his right hand when he wasn't supposed to at the end of the game. So it's like that is really their number one issue. They don't have one facilitator on that team. And Derrick Rose, God love the guy. He tried, but he's not 25 anymore.
No, he's not.
And
but
it's a huge problem for the Knicks.
And offensively, he was great for them. He was the most consistent player offensively in this series for them. But you're right. I mean, this group, where as the playoffs started, I said, man, what a foundation. What a great way to start. They can go into this series. They have home court advantage. Maybe they get into a second round series and do some damage. What a great foundation. I come out of it now thinking they're not any closer to being a championship team than they were when they won 20 games. They're not.
Yeah.
They're that far away from the best teams in the league. So that's why this offseason, when Leon Rose, that's how we feel as fans. Leon Rose has just got to be completely rattled.
Yeah,
because they went from being on the right track to who the F knows. Like, if they blew up this entire roster and went in a different direction to try to get superstars, I wouldn't care anymore after what I saw here, because they ain't close. They're not even sniffing what the best teams in the league are.
The real question is, what is the team going to look like when Mitchell Robinson comes back? What does the team look like with another year of R.J. Barrett, another year of Emmanuel Quickly?
Those guys will be here, and we know that.
We know that. And, are they going to bring back Taj Gibson? Are they bringing back, are they going to extend? They don't have to, but are they going to extend Julius Randle?
They can't now.
And if you don't extend him, then what does he become? I think next year I wouldn't extend him.
You can't after this.
I wouldn't. I would say you got to come back another year, and we got to see it again, and we got to see you really step up, and then maybe he steps up. He has another all-star season, and they add a few other pieces that I'm not really sure who those players are going to be, but they all know that their dearth of talent showed up in this particular series. They really did. It really did. And the point guard situation is a huge, huge question mark. I don't care what anybody says. Until they get that guy that they believe in, can be what Trae Young is for the Hawks, to be what James Harden is turning out to be for the Nets. All these teams that are big time teams and great teams. They have stars. They have the Giannis's and of course the Kevin Durant's, but they also have that key facilitator. Like when Trae Young goes down the middle of the court, and Reggie Miller kept saying it last night, you can't let him have both the floater or the alley-oop. You got to take one or two of the way.
And that was,
and he was having his way throughout the series with that particular play. Yes,
the whole 5 games,
because nobody could stay with him.
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, and this team was the best defensive team in the NBA all regular season long.
Yeah, but that kid's a special kid. Man.
I know, but to me, it was like if they were going to play like this, it didn't matter who they played in the first round; they were going to get smacked.
And that's the thing. Like you talk about the embarrassing way that the Garden was reacting to Trae Young initially in the first 2 games. I mean, he came in and just showed everybody, look, man, you can say whatever the hell you want about me. You can say whatever you want about, or whatever you want to say to my parents or whatever else. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to show you how this position is supposed to be played. And, he had his share of turnovers and missed shots. But, man, every time he was on the basketball court and he had the ball in his hands, it was like everybody was back on their heels. And he owned the Knicks. Capella owned the Knicks defensively and on the boards, yes. But it's all the energy that Trae Young brought to that team. Now, whether he could do that against Philadelphia, that'll be fun to watch that series, just simply because of him and Ben Simmons and the difference and the different way that they play and everything else.
The Embiid injury, I mean, the Hawks, I mean, they have to be salivating now.
They should be, but Trae Young, let's face it, that kid, like we haven't seen a lot of him. Now we just saw 5 games of him, and you could see that he is just on a different planet athletically than anybody he's going to play against.
So the Knicks in this series were Big Zoo in that owner's suite. Didn't belong and got thrown out really quick. That's what happened.
It was a little disappointing. Remember, the Hawks did make some additions at the trade deadline, and they
got a new coach too.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing, and they were going for it. Again, I go back to the trade deadline. The Knicks didn't add anybody. I wasn't advocating for them to add anybody. I didn't want them to ruin their future. I figured that this was going to be a temporary thing, that they were good this year, that they gave us something to really be proud of, and then unfortunately it didn't work out in the last 5 games. But I'm also glad that they're sitting here with $60 million of cap space. They're sitting here with 2 first-round picks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I've always wanted with the Knicks. I'm sick and tired of Band-Aids. I'm sick and tired of some, free agent at the age of 32 or 34, coming in here and playing 2 years. I love what Derrick Rose did this year, but that's not the future of this team.
Yeah, and this is going to be the discussion as we head into the offseason is who is that guy that's going to put them over the top, and how do you acquire him?
Well,
now,
what
I
is
know,
over the top, Jay?
Well, I mean, over the top is being one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference, being a Brooklyn, Milwaukee, or Philadelphia. I mean, that's what you want to get to. And like the guy that I know Stephen A. Smith is screaming about it, so that means everybody's paying attention to it, of course, as I roll my eyes for the radio audience. That Damian Lillard's the guy. You got to go get Damian Lillard. He has to play in New York. Damian Lillard would have to have a huge change in mentality from what he has said his entire career. He has talked about, I'm staying here. I'm trying to do it here. I don't want to be one of these guys that teams up with it. I want to do it here. So he'd have to go against everything he said for his entire career to accept a trade to come to the Knicks. It's just that there's nobody out there that makes any sense because everybody signed contracts. You know what the Nets have done. Giannis signed his contract. Like, who is the guy?
So you have in your conference alone, and obviously we see that you have Trae Young and how good the Hawks just basically played against the Knicks. You have Trae Young down there. You have Embiid. You have Durant, Kyrie, and of course James Harden. You have Giannis and Middleton. You have Drew Holiday. I mean, and we have Julius Randle, R.J. Barrett, and Emmanuel Quickley and Mitchell Robinson. That's basically what we have.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the future. Those four guys are the future.
And Julius Randle is now a question mark if he's going to be the future.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, those four guys right there, that's your youth and that's your future next. If they decide to extend Julius Randle until he's 30 or 31, that's your next 5-year basis of the Knick Foundation. Yeah. And then now it comes, what do they add to that mix?
And a long way to go.
Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the red bell so you're notified when we have new content.